Hey there. So it's Reba from Teen Reba and the show Open House with Teen Reba. And today we are here to talk about what the typical buyer process is. So we've got the outline of this down in the bottom of this email. So if you want to go and refresh your memory, if you don't want to just watch the video again. However, the video is going to give you a little bit more detail than just kind of the basics there. So let's go through that fun list. So first thing's going to end up happening is once you're done, looking at all the fun stuff online, then, we're going to be touring properties, going out to look at things, determining what you might want to write an offer on, collecting information, asking questions of listing agents, things of that nature. But when you actually narrow down and find the place that you really like, we're going to write an offer for you. So writing an offer means that me and my team are going to put together a document that will outline all of the terms that you're going to be offering to the seller, which are things such as the purchase price, how much earnest money you're going to put down, which, by the way, earnest money is not money on top of your down payment and closing costs. It's part of that you put forward in a trust account while you're under contract. So if you're planning on putting, say, 10% down, expect 1 to 3% of that to be probably what your earnest money amount will be. Meaning, like if you're doing $20,000 of a down payment, you might be offering, say, $5,000 as earnest money. That's part of that down payment amount. But it's going to vary from customer to customer, so just know that we'll be having a conversation about that. You're going to have a closing date that you're going to choose. Keep in mind your closing dates need to be something that we discuss with your lender up front if you're using financing, because every loan program takes a little bit different amount of time. So we know that right now there's a very busy market going on. So we want to be in contact with your lender about what the typical timelines are for closing. And we also want to be mindful of how busy the closing departments are at the different counties that we all do business in here. So your offer is going to have the business terms. Once we write that offer and you get a chance to review everything, ask your questions, we submit that to the listing agent in their office, and then they put that in front of the seller. Now, in today's market, there can be two different ways that happens. Some sellers say, hey, I want to see all offers as they come in. And so if you move quickly, you could be the first one in, and if there's no one else right behind you, great, you're the only one being reviewed. Some of them might collect several on the same day just because the market's busy, and then choose to look that night. Others actually plan around a review date, and that could be anywhere from 4 to 7 days from going on market. And that's because the listing agent's trying to make sure that they get as many people who are out in the market looking at the property so that they can hopefully have competing offers, and then the seller can choose who they think is the best buyer from the offers they receive. Now, not all review dates end up culminating in multiple offers, but it could happen, so be prepared. And then we'll, in each situation, be talking with you about what our best practices on how to compete in those situations. We can cover that in a different video later, or feel free to send me questions. But let's say you're the only one and your offer has something in it that maybe the seller doesn't love, so they send back your offer with something crossed out with what is now called a counter offer. So you're going to have to take a look at that with us, and we'll discuss whatever that item is. Sometimes it's the price that's different. Sometimes it's the closing date that's different. Maybe it's some other term in the offer that's different that the seller wants to see. Maybe they need more time post-closing. Who knows? But if they send something back with a change, you're not obligated to accept that. Counter offers, if you don't like what they're suggesting, you can walk away, or we can continue trying to negotiate. But once everyone does get to the place that they like all the terms, both the buyer and the seller side, then we get what's called mutual acceptance. Okay, so mutual acceptance must be with all parties, meaning the buyer and the seller, come to agreement on all of the terms of the contract. Everybody has signed off every little detail, and everyone's moving forward towards closing. Now, you as a buyer, once it's signed around, you're not done. You actually have the onus to complete all of your contingencies, because chances are pretty good that there are things such as a home inspection, or there's appraisals and your financing, and maybe a title review, a number of other things that will be occurring throughout this. So number one biggest contingency is usually inspection. So we have a different video that talks about home inspections, what to expect from a home inspector and the kind of best practices around that. And again, feel free to ask questions as we go through the process. We'll be talking about this a lot. But number one is trying to get through that inspection. Once again, we can get back into negotiations, potentially, depending on what is found during the inspection. Now, you have 4 choices during that inspection of either saying, yep, did my inspection, fine with the house the way it is, happy to take it with whatever little tiny things there are, because I will tell you, every house has flaws or some outlet that's a little loose or whatever it could be. Sometimes they're big flaws and we have to go and renegotiate. If it's stuff that's really ugly and you don't even want to try to take it on, the second option in a home inspection contingency is to just say, no, thank you, and you cancel. So number one is yes, and let's just move on. Number 2 is no, canceling it right now. Number 3 is, hey, we found stuff, but we want to explore what this means for us. And so we ask for additional time. Now that's a notice that we provide. It's a unilateral, meaning one way. Don't have a bilateral. The seller doesn't get to make a choice about this. It's in your original contract, what the timeline terms are for this. So we put that notice out. We get the extra time to do the research needed or bring in the experts to look at what the item is. So then your fourth option is, once you've done that, you can then come back with, hey seller, I'm asking you to do something, whether that's give me a credit so I have money left over at closing so that I can pay for some of these things and I'll take care of it myself. Or you can ask them to do repairs, or you might ask for a combination of those things. There's a number of different ways this can go, and I'm not going to try and cover all of them because this video would take way too long. But that's the number one contingency for us to pass through. Appraising the property is the next piece, which is then in part of your financing. If you are getting a loan from a traditional source, they're going to want to have an appraiser come out to validate that what you're paying for the property is appropriate. And that can impact also what your financing is, whether you can get the financing, and also how much you really need to put down. Because if there's a big disparity on the value, then we have to go and negotiate that. Because again, there are multiple ways that that can be handled, whether it's a challenge to the appraisal, redoing the appraisal, paying a difference between the appraisal value and what you put in as your offer. Maybe the seller will accept whatever that other appraisal price is, or if you can't get to any agreement on that, you can cancel. So again, number of different things that can come up along the way. But if you can get through all of those things and you move it on towards closing, great, fantastic, financing continues. And as we get to the closing, then there is the preparing of the closing disclosure statement. Now, don't get that confused with the signing documents. The disclosure statements are things that have to do with things like TRID, which is the Truth in Lending Act, Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act, Integrated Disclosure, TRID, TRID. It's really long. That has a bunch of legal requirements around documents that need to be provided to you so that you understand exactly what it is that you're getting from your loan. Once those are done and they have a timeline assigned to them, it's usually 3 days, then the escrow company is also, in process of doing their numbers with the lender as well as the seller side for payoff statements in case the seller has a loan to have paid off. So all of those things are going on behind the scenes, stuff that you don't get to see, but it's things that like me and my team are staying on top of throughout the whole process. We're not always giving you notifications unless you just really want to be bored to death with the complete process. But just we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, especially in that last week, because those first 2 weeks of your contract are going to be very busy with getting earnest money to the offices for a deposit, getting your inspection done, negotiating inspection items. And then there's like a little window of time where you're going to be like, what goes on? Well, that's a great time to pack. And then that last week of your contract is when it's really, really busy again, because it's signing the disclosures, making sure that you're getting your signing appointment set up, making sure you get your final down payment and closing costs set up in wire transfer and or cashier's check to take to closing. Once all of that gets in and your bank funds the wire transfer of the loan, then the escrow company and the title company send the deed off to recording to the county recorder's office, whether that's King, Snohomish, Pierce, or any other county here in the state. Off it goes to get recorded along with your loan documents. And then once that's done, now keep in mind the last day of closing, your contracts, the Northwest Multiple Listing Service contracts will say that the seller has till 9 p.m. on the closing date, because you're going to probably sign a day before closing. It's not always perfect. Sometimes you are signing the day of closing, but most of the time we're having you sign the day before, sometimes even 2 days before if we're lucky enough to have the documents moving very smoothly. But they're not always the same day. So do not expect to get your keys the day you sign your documents. We have to make sure the county actually records, and then you can get them. You'll also find that our team tends to set up closings anywhere from a Tuesday through a Thursday in the week, because Mondays aren't always great because people are just getting back in the office. And Fridays, sometimes people want to get the heck out of town. And then also, in case the county is really backed up and can't record your documents that day, you don't want it to bounce to the next week, because we can only close on a day if the county is open. And they're only typically open Monday through Friday as long as there's not a holiday. So we tend to choose Tuesday through Thursday for our closing dates, because just in case there's a bump, we typically have room to maneuver around that. And you're not stuck going, oh my gosh, I just had my moving van set up for the day post-closing. Definitely never book your moving van for the day of closing. It's a bad idea. Just so you know, it's like automatically asking your deal to get a delay. We've seen it happen. So anyway, once we do get to recording, sometimes we can get the keys earlier in that day if the recording has happened, and if the seller has already moved on, we must have their permission to pass the keys on to you and to let you access that day. But as long as we have everything done, we can get the keys to you. We've been working with a lot of our clients on just getting the keys the next day so there's no crunch time. And then, book your moving van for either that weekend or the weekend following, even better, especially if you plan on doing any work before you get in. So that's the final thing on there is moving day. So just quickly running through it again, writing the offer, accepting the offer after all terms are agreed to, removing contingencies, number one, inspection, get through the appraisal process, making sure that the financing is going to work. Closing disclosures get done before signing disclosures and the signing closing documents that you'll do with escrow, which most of the time you're doing through mobile notaries nowadays. Then we end up going to the recording office. Once we get it recorded, you get your keys, and then you move in. And then you enjoy your place. So we're excited about working with you. We hope this was helpful in explaining the process to you in a somewhat brief format, but trying to cover a lot of details. And if you have other questions besides that, by all means, please send your questions to us in email at info@teamreba.com so someone in the office can help get back to you right away. Or you can always send me a message on my cell phone, 206-910-3429, cell or text, however you want to do it, call or text. And we look forward to working with you more and getting you into a home of your dreams. Thanks.